All right, everyone, we're live. We've got David Rams here joining me. Been looking
I
forward, been looking forward to this stream. I hope many of you have too. That is the ones who understand what we're talking about. It's a bit, it sounds like a bit of a vague issue to a lot of people. They might be see this thumbnail, see the video description and stuff and think, hold on, what are these two guys going to be banging on about for however long here? It might be one of these things that you need to be on top of with like current events and stuff, but we'll run down all that in the stream. But basically, it is going to be relevant to veganism. I promise. It's not just going to be two, cis white males having a rant about socio-political issues for the duration of the stream. This is totally going to be relevant to the animal rights movement, but we are going to talk about current affairs, some stuff that's been going on, specifically what we refer to in sociology as the culture war. Do you know what, David? Do you want to say what it is that you think I mean when I say like the culture war, and when I say in the video description the tide is turning? What are we here to talk about today? How do you interpret these words? What do they mean to you?
What a culture war is. I suppose, like, okay, where we're at now, I guess it's kind of like the battle between, I guess you could say, heavily far left progressive ideas, and those kind of ideas fighting against what you could call like moderates and anyone kind of leaning right politically. So it's like, it's one kind of big group going for really radical, crazy change that sometimes may make sense. I mean, some people put us in that basket, right? We're trying to create radical change and it makes sense. And then some of the things that are like, that really makes no sense and cannot be debated. Like, they can't debate some of the things they're trying to push because they lose and they fall to pieces, right? So there's that whole world against everybody who is quote unquote normal, and then people who are more like say like right leaning, let's say more conservative or traditional type people, all the way over to that side until you get to the dangerous people on that side as well. I suppose they're also involved in this.
Yeah, I mean, I would just simply describe it as who's winning the war of ideas currently. So if we look at like the past, I don't know, the past 5-6 years or so, I definitely think it's been it's been a crazy past few years. Can I just say that the last few years, as I say in the description, the last few years have just been wild, right? So we're going to get into that now. Talk about some of these, the political climate and stuff, how things have changed, who are the people who are winning and losing the battles of ideas. So I'll quickly just start the stream by asking you, David, like, what have you noticed? Like, what are you noticing both inside and outside of the animal rights movement? If we're talking about this, if we're talking about the battle of ideas, if we're talking about the culture war, what are some things that you've noticed, there, now, what's happening?
What like topics have come up, you mean? Like, or battles have been had, or?
Yeah, maybe we'll get into the topics in a bit,
Right.
but overall, what have you noticed? What are you noticing something shifting? Are you not? What's a change you've noticed?
Well, I mean, I guess from memory, from like 2017 onwards, like not even 2017. For me, this whole thing starts around probably like actually 2018 up until maybe like last year, basically, possibly 2021. There was a massive shift towards being just perpetually offended by everything. And if you weren't offended, then you were the problem. And that was actually a thing that went around. If you don't see a problem, you are the problem. This was like a quote that a lot of people were using. And it was the trend was to see racism in everything, right? See sexism is everywhere. And it's hidden, maybe. That's why you may not see it as well. And it's microaggression. It's this, it's that. And it was all that for a very long time. And if you disagreed, well, get the fuck out. Like, you're cancelled. You're not allowed here. You shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't see it because you're white and stuff like that. That was how things were in my experience. From like, it kicked off big time for me from like 2018, 19 until like 2021, maybe 2020 included, because I don't know, the end at least of 2020, I think it was more tapering out. We got obsessed with other stuff, I guess. And then now 2023, it feels like there's just been a massive U-turn all of a sudden. It felt like that was going to be the new normal. Like, everyone's just always offended. But now yeah, it feels like there's been a big U-turn. There's some big things happen with some companies where they've tried to capitalize on that perpetual offended society, and instead of everyone being like, yeah, this is great, they've gone, hey, no, we're sick of this shit. Shut up. We're not going to buy your products anymore. So yeah, some way or another, things have took a big turn. I said towards the end of 2020, I think that was a bit of a mistake. I think it's probably more very recently, like 2022, 23, though it's really turned. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I mean, we did this stream a couple months back whenever it was about like, why is veganism's woke mob so silent, as in like the intersectional crowd within the animal rights movement, the ideologues as you call them, because we don't want to tar every single intersectional with the same brush, but that's where all the problems are coming from. It just tends to be coming from one group inside AR. And here's the thing, here's the overall arching point I guess we're trying to make in this stream is, look, these ideas still exist, seeing offense in everything, seeing racism everywhere you look, seeing sexism or transphobia or whatever it is, like everything is something ist. But the weight of this just doesn't seem to have the same impact as it did. Like, if you pointed out something as racist in 2020, you were just right. It's just like, this is racist. Why is it racist? Because you said so. And if you disagreed with that, that makes you a racist, right?
Yeah. Well, they had to give you an example of it, though. Like, let's like give, because people might not believe what you're saying right now. So I'll give an example of it. There was a campaign, I believe it was 2020. It may have been 2021, and by vegans, and they were going after popular vegans, including Earthling Ed, including Joey Carbstrong, a couple of others as well, maybe, and they were telling them, if you do not denounce white supremacy right now, you are like a racist. You are a white supremacist. So just by them not wanting to say certain words they were being told to say meant that they must have been that. And they went after, like I said, a couple people, but the one I saw them go after the most was Ed. And this group, they hounded him. This is vegans attacking another vegan. And it went on for at least a month or two, at least. Yeah. Daily posts, tagging him in stories, like constantly just. And it wasn't just like, get a couple people getting a couple likes. It really picked up a little pace, People were really on it. Mental. Insane.
It's crazy. And it's just like, what were they trying to achieve? Like this whole denounce white supremacy, which is it's just a moral obligation to not be a white supremacist. What they're trying to do here is exert power control over people. They get a dopamine hit of saying, ha, you, David Ram, said this. Why? Because I told you to say it. Like, I know you're not a white supremacist, right? So I don't need you, David, to denounce on the stream white supremacy, right?
Yeah, it's a kink, isn't it?
Right, there you go.
It's a kink, man. They're all sat there jerking off over the computers every time a white person says, "Oh, I'm ashamed to be white. Thank you for showing me the way." They get off on it. No doubt.
I mean, it was I remember this whole incident that you were talking about. I remember one of the funniest ones I ever saw. They tried to cancel James. Well, I wouldn't say the cancel campaign didn't go that far, but basically, people got triggered because Donald Trump appeared in James Aspie's dream. That was hilarious. He literally
I didn't see this.
Mate, it was the funniest triggering I've ever seen in the animal rights movement. So
how did I miss that?
Mate, yeah, it was probably in about 2019, 18. James Aspie just did like a post just like, I had the craziest dream. I was walking through like this graveyard and Donald Trump appeared and like we had a conversation about veganism or something. They were up in his comments like, what? I can't believe Donald Trump, you were dreaming about Donald Trump or something.
Amazing.
They literally kicked off over Trump appearing in James's dream. Yeah.
There was another example I got for you, just reminded me of it, from way back when Alex Bear's Amazing Vegan Outreach, he made a post because he was all about communications back then. He's, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know him, he was like an activist training kind of guy. He'd go around the world giving activist trainings. Doesn't do it anymore. That's a whole other topic as to why he doesn't do it. But what he'd done, he'd put a story up, right? And in the story, he was showing people how communication can change lives. And it was a story about how this Indian woman, I believe she was Indian, maybe Pakistani, had convinced a white supremacist to leave a white supremacist movement and actually recover from being super racist. And he was saying, look, see, we should talk to these people. Like, this communication is so important. He almost got he got cancelled. Yeah, people tried to cancel him because they said, "Are you trying to say that we should be kind to white supremacists or something?" And he was like, "No, I'm showing you that communication can change. How do you expect to change people if you just tell them go away and you're not welcome in our society and we'll never speak to you again?" That makes them worse. That makes them more extreme. You have to talk to them and convince them.
They never apply this.
That.
Yeah, they never apply this to carnists, right? They always say the reason I march hand in hand with speciesists at a BLM rally is because we need to build bridges with these people. So they will build bridges with those funding the animal holocaust, but they won't build any bridges with people who have some kind of different political opinion from them when it comes to like any human issues. I'm not even talking about white supremacists. I'm just talking about like conservatives. You could be, you could like be a Tory or something. No building bridges with Tories. Get the fuck out of the movement. But then they build bridges with people who walk around with fucking decapitated pigs' heads. I mean, come on. What is there's like a huge, but you know, I think I think this big furor stuff kind of, I think, happened in around 2016. I think most of this outrage culture, David, was propelled by Trump derangement syndrome. And you don't need to be a Trump fan to acknowledge this. You can think Trump is a piece of shit. But everyone has to admit now, looking back, the complete and utter hysteria over just one orange guy being some guy who used to star in The Apprentice, being in the White House. It was just crazy, as it, you know, it is, and the fact that Biden has come into the White House, he's everything, in my opinion, that they said about Trump. But what you accuse Trump of one thing. Well, Trump's this. Well, okay, how is this not true of Biden? Well, Trump's that. Okay, once again, how is this not true of Biden? But it was just and this was my leading theory when we had that stream, David. Since he's gone out of the White House, the hysteria has died down. I think so much of this was propelled by Trump derangement syndrome. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't comment, to be honest, on that specific. I mean, in America, maybe in America, this is what was driving this kind of behavior, but they wouldn't explain why it was happening across Europe or in the UK, right? Because Trump is a whole other beast in a whole other part of the world. But he was taking up the media cycle in practically every country. So I don't know, you might be onto something with that. It might have been the fuel. Yeah.
Now, let's get things going then. So let's talk about some stuff, some specific incidents we've noticed that shows that the tide is turning with the culture war. So things that you just would not have ever imagined happening a few years ago, like in the height of the peak cancel culture, I'd say was like 2020. That year was just wild, right? Stuff that you just could not ever imagining happening in 2020 because, you'd have got cancelled if this happens or blah, blah, blah. Is happening now. And it's like there seems to be a societal pushback now against these ideas that everyone was bending the knee to. So the first incident I wanted to talk about is there was a Starbucks manager. Now, Starbucks, one of like the wokest companies, right? And there's another significant story we've got about Starbucks after this. But a Starbucks former manager who got fired has just won a $25 million lawsuit because she was fired for being white. This is at the peak of all the cancel bullshit. Now, I think it was over, I think something happened like 2 black customers were in the store. And I can't remember, I don't know what it was that they did, but they got arrested or they got called the police on for something. I can't remember what it was. And basically Starbucks said, we will make sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen before, and we'll be firing like responsible staff members and blah, blah, blah. But they specifically singled out her, they found that they singled out her because of the color of her skin. I don't think they fired, the quote unquote POC staff members or something, like even though people were like equally responsible for whatever it was, or that it turned out that they were right. Did you hear about this news story, and what are your thoughts on this.
I didn't hear about it, but what I'd assume is Starbucks probably made a decision based on the climate that imagine if there were like 5 employees, 4 of them weren't white, 1 of them was white, then it's going to be the easiest to fire the white one because they risk loads of other stuff by firing one of the people who aren't white because of how society is or was with that situation. It's so that's probably what they were thinking. Like, oh, this is probably going to be the one that causes us the least headache. I would assume. I don't know about the situation, but I understand the logic if that's what it was. Just unfortunately, in their case, they picked on the wrong whitey.
So this is, I mean, hold on, let's read this bit here. Miss Phillips claims Starbucks retaliated against Philadelphia area white managers, even if they were not involved in the incident.
Right, okay,
so this is how woke Starbucks are. And this is how much they were getting away with stuff, David. So this is why we're talking about this in the stream, okay?
Right. Okay.
Starbucks actually got away with firing people just for the crime of being white over an incident that they had nothing to do with, right? And there was no pushback at the time. It was just like, well, what do you expect? I mean, you were white while working for Starbucks. I mean, you should be fired. That was like the culture, right, back then. Now, hang on. Now the establishment has changed, or it's changed. It's on the verge of changing. Now there's a pushback, and now she has just won this landmark case. We've heard about people winning lawsuits because they've been fired for being black or being Asian because of ridiculous racism enacted by racist staff members and directors and stuff over the decades in wherever it is. But this represents a big shift, right? This is now something that you can now feel that if you're a white person and you have been singled out and targeted for your skin color at work, you can now win megabucks, which just wasn't the case before. 25 million she's won for this.
Or the absolute minimum, you can actually argue your case and not just be treated like scum for actually bringing it up, which I think that alone is something that is important as well.
Yeah. And then the next Starbucks case I wanted to talk about. This one is particularly wild and represents a particularly crazy shift in the culture war. What do you know, David, about the trans Starbucks manager who was fired? Do you know about this story? Yeah,
I saw the video. So there was like an altercation between a Starbucks manager, a trans woman, right? I believe.
Yes.
And the customer misgendered the person, I think, by accident. I don't think on purpose. There was an altercation anyway.
Yes.
And this manager flipped the shit at him, screaming at him and telling him to get out of the Starbucks and stuff. I think if it was that video, I remember.
Yeah, and, it was. It was a female customer at the counter, and the trans woman manager was saying, "You are being transphobic, Karen. Now get out!" And then would like basically pushed her out of the shop, and then this customer, her boyfriend or partner or friend or whoever, was like filming at the door, and then the trans manager walks up to this guy and just smacks the phone out of his hand. Let's try and play the video. Hold on.
Going next level.
Yeah, let's see if I can.
While you're looking for that, I'll tell everybody. I saw like Bianca was asking, will it bring back to veganism? This is, as far as I understand anyway, I've got the general plan for today. The plan is, this is all to put into context a vegan point, right?
Yes.
So like these are all examples to make a very big, important point at the end of this little kind of section that is directly about veganism. So just hang on, guys, it's coming.
Yes, thanks, David, for addressing that. Yeah, Bianca, if you look at the title of the stream, it says, and what this means for veganism. So we're going to talk about all these incidents that have happened, and we're going to say why this is specific to veganism. But we just need to set the...
Flesh it out. Flesh it out.
Exactly.
Set the scene.
So, right, hold on. Let me see if I can play this bad boy. Right, so here is the incident, folks, that happened. Right.
You're rude. Absolutely not. Don't ever call me transphobic. Ever. You do not know me.
You're being transphobic, Karen.
Do not call me transphobic.
You are transphobic. Now get
I want
out.
a refund.
You're not having one, dude.
Please,
Look,
please,
please.
then.
Hi, get out. You
Absolutely.
are trespassing now.
They've got cameras.
You are trespassing.
Please,
Get
got
out.
cameras.
Get out. You are trespassing.
Apparently,
I
Will
think you're
said something
disgusting.
transphobic.
You actually, you
Mm.
Did it ever come to like what actually was said?
Yeah, I think what it was the I think there was a person behind like the till who identifies as non-binary or something. And I think
that Starbucks must be a nightmare.
right.
It's a fucking minefield.
And this customer, right? And I think
I mean that. Can I just clarify? I mean that as in for the customer, it's a minefield because you're going to make a mistake. You know, like if there's multiple people with all different pronouns and stuff, it must be tough.
Right. And I think what this customer had said was just said, "Oh yes, she hasn't given me my coffee yet," or something like that. So then I think the trans woman who managed the Starbucks, you know, would have gone up to her and said, "She? What do you mean she?" And she'd have gone, "But the girl who just served me the coffee behind. How dare you? Do you mean they?" Or something. And then it kind of just erupted from there. Now, here's where it's significant, folks. What did Starbucks do over this incident? I mean, you know, PR, you've got to protect, you know, obviously they want us to stick up for you know, trans rights and non-binary rights and everything. So I'm assuming they wrote an apology to the trans community and the non-binary community over this incident, right, where a female customer had misgendered one of their staff and said, "We will not tolerate this, and you know, we will ensure from now on, you know," and our manager did the right thing by getting this customer removed from the store. No, folks. No. They fired the manager. So that trans woman you just saw in the video that you just watched there, folks, Starbucks have fired her. Now, this is unthinkable, David. This is significant. Would this have happened a few years ago? They fired a trans woman for kicking out a customer for being transphobic. Starbucks did this.
It seems like, honestly, maybe that trans people have finally gotten what they were after all along, which is total and complete equality. Because if a manager of any store, trans or not, spoke to a customer like that, they're getting fired. So actually, maybe they've actually finally reached that point where it's like, yeah, okay, you know, you want to be treated the same as everybody else, fine, you're fired. You screamed at a customer in their face, clapped in their face, told them to get out, and wouldn't give them a refund. Lose your job.
But imagine if this was BLM in 2020 and a customer got kicked out for having a T-shirt that said "White Lives Matter," and the manager was even more aggressive. There's no way where they would have fired the manager.
They wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah.
They actually wouldn't have been able to. They would have had protests and potentially even like a mini riot in that area. You never know, but at least protests for sure. Yeah.
Right. So this represents just a giant shift in the culture war. So these are two massive Starbucks stories here. So someone rightfully receiving compensation for being discriminated against for being white by the company, and then Starbucks actually firing a trans woman for kicking out a customer for being quote unquote transphobic. This is, when you're talking from a corporate perspective as well, you think of all the PR and stuff that goes into these companies. Starbucks are constantly, you know, a company like them, they're constantly in, you know, cahoots with whoever their PR company is, saying, what do we do here? What do we say here? Their PR company knows something, right, that the public doesn't know. They know about this shift in the culture war. They're saying now the right thing for you to do is to probably just fire this manager. And Starbucks have done that. Like, how significant was this for you, David, to see that? And how shocked were you when you saw this happen?
Yeah, I was surprised about it. I didn't expect it to go that way. I thought they'd probably just make an excuse or have like some kind of campaign against the customer. And I think a lot of people, some people did, you know, think like, oh yeah, we should support this individual. But it is a massive shock that Starbucks straight up made the sacking, because it was the right thing to do. No matter, you know, I don't know. I feel like no matter kind of what that customer had said, the reaction as a representative of an organization to clap in someone's face like that, It's super unprofessional, and grabbing the other person's phone. No matter how harsh the other person had made a comment, it would have been inappropriate behavior regardless. You know what I mean? So it's logical, and it's not what you expect. So you are right. It's a shock. Because it felt like for a long time that if you are some kind of oppressed minority, you can do anything and you are untouchable.
Yeah.
Which has led to some really, really, really messed up stuff. Like we've seen, I don't need to go through the list of things that have been, things that have been happening over the last years to make that point, I hope. But yeah.
Well, yeah, it's unthinkable. I mean, just like even a few years ago, the trans woman manager of that Starbucks outlet and the non-binary staff member who was apparently misgendered by this customer, they would have had a force field around them, protecting them from any. And it's just like if they, what they say is right. If they kick you out because they feel in any way offended or it doesn't align with what they believe about this, they're just right. They get to kick you out. Right. So, and what's weird, it's like, even despite Starbucks firing this trans woman, and even despite this white staff member getting the $25 million payout, we're not even seeing backlash against Starbucks for doing this. Where are the riots and stuff? This just represents. Yeah. Let's now talk about the BLM bankruptcy stuff. So, obviously, there was the whole furor that happened in 2020. They raked in a lot of money. We don't need to spend a huge amount of time discussing this because you and I have already done some good. We talked about this enough in our streams and stuff. How BLM.
I'll say one thing just before we go on. I saw a couple people were saying that they've not heard or thought about anything about BLM since 2020, and that's because obviously, they've not been doing any big events or anything like that. But it doesn't change the fact that they still swindled millions of dollars from the animal rights world. That's why, George, someone made a joke that they live rent free in your head. Well, the reason for that is because both you and I back then were seeing animal rights orgs and activists handing over money that should have been going to animals to these groups, only for them to go and spend it on mansions and giving the money to family members and stuff like that. So that's why it still comes up. FYI, it's a big deal.
And and we haven't seen any kind of apology for this. The people who are responsible for swindling the movement, for holding vegans at gunpoint and saying you must donate to this organization, they have not. They talk about accountability culture, but they haven't come forward to hold themselves accountable to say, "I'm sorry, we fucked up. We screwed you over. All this money that you donated to them, it didn't get spent on anti-racism. It got spent on." Not even if it was spent on anti-racism, you're still not meant to bully animal rights orgs into donating to anything that's not to do with the animal holocaust. So I don't see still how it's even relevant. But what's even worse is that it didn't even get spent on the things that they were telling people. But look what's happening now. So this extremely rich corporation, I'm going to call them a corporation because they're not a justice group, they're a corporation that makes money for themselves and to spend on houses and swimming pools and bailing out murderers and stuff, but they're now potentially going bankrupt. So how do you see this as being significant in the culture war, David?
I actually don't even know what to make of that, to be honest with you. It seems unthinkable. A good thing that it probably has shown is that to a lot of people that supported them and with money, it shows now clearly that they made a mistake. There's no doubt now, right? They have mishandled money. They have misspent money. They swindled you. And anybody who was in that group of people that were making threats or making demands for people to donate should be ashamed of themselves. And an apology should come too, but an apology only needs to look like this. All it needs to be is, I shouldn't have got involved with a corporation or organization without knowing anything about them. I should have done my activism independently or with, grassroots groups. I realize I made a mistake. That's all it needs to be. But it shows a big turn. It's probably aided the shift in the culture war to remind people that not everything is as it seems. And a lot of these groups that are making demands of the culture and society, They're in it for their own means. They're not in it for social justice. And this has been a big turning point for, I think, a lot of people now are paying attention to that and starting to maybe double check the things they believe. I'm like, wait a minute, like, what is this? Is this also a money making scheme? Like, what's going on here? Are people using horrific violence and things to make money? Because that's pretty much what they did. They used a horrific situation, a very horrible situation, to make bank off of it, right? Who else is doing that?
Yeah, exactly. They the far left keeps talking about how they're anti-capitalist. BLM capitalizes on black deaths in police custody. They are objectively capitalist group. This isn't even up for debate anymore. It's just proven they are an objectively capitalist group, and yet they still defend them. That's why when far leftists in the vegan movement keep saying veganism, it needs to be anti-capitalist, it's objectively a left-leaning movement, blah blah blah, it's like, but you're not even anti-capitalist. You can't say #resist capitalism while you support these massive corporations like BLM who rinse money off you.
Yeah, we see this again and again. Like, you know, there's people who can claim themselves to be like, you know, anti-capitalists and whatever. I mean, another example, like Rage Against the Machine, who charged insane amounts for their tickets and T-shirts, and there's even AOC over in the US, and she also like sells. I believe someone was showing me something that she's got a merch store or something as well, or something like that, or at least her team has. Like, you can get AOC merch from her team. It's like, you know, so again and again we see that there's massive hypocrisy with this anti-capitalist stuff. But
they are the machine.
Yeah, exactly. And how's the culture war? How's that affecting the culture war again? Made to make it relevant. I think people are now realizing they've been swindled and starting to get pissed off about it.
Yeah, 100%. And do you know, for me, what was maybe the most significant incident that happened recently that really just exposed BLM and how they just time things conveniently to like win an election or to make money at the right time? Patrisse Cullors, her own cousin, died recently in police custody. Her own cousin, David. I mean, this should be George Floyd times a million. This should be the most famous incident in BLM history, right? This is the founder of BLM's cousin dying in police custody. Did anyone even hear about this? Most people in the you didn't know about it. Like, now, what does this tell you, David? The fact that her own cousin died in police custody and there were no riots, there was no like, you know, you must do this, you must do that. It's they timed the 2020 thing perfectly to capitalize it just at the right time, just in time for the election when they wanted to get bad orange man out of office and replace him, by the way, with the most racist president in our lifetimes, in Joe Biden, in my opinion. And the fact that you included that, and you're someone who's, you know, me and you, we're always talking about socio-political issues, and you're on top of all this stuff, and even you hadn't heard that her own cousin had died in this. He should be a million times more famous than George Floyd, shouldn't he?
You'd expect some media would have covered it. Some people would have talked about it on Twitter, or, you know, if not a campaign, at least I would expect it to have come across it. Yeah, but no, nothing.
And people now, I think, are just getting more, you know, there's a difference between woke and awake. And I think the woke people are the blue-pilled people, and the awake people, they're choosing to not be sleepwalkers anymore. And there's just been a huge pushback with this. But I want to get onto the next subject now, which I think was a hugely significant part of the change in the culture war that's happening recently. And that is Elon's takeover of Twitter. You did a podcast about this. It was just a solo podcast, the Rams Den with David Rams just by himself on his lonesome. And it was a great podcast. It was really listenable, folks. So if you want to check that out, I recommend that. Go to David's channel, The Rams. That's his podcast channel, The Rams Den. And he's got an episode there where he's just talking on his own about Elon's takeover of Twitter and how this is significant and what this means. And I think that's very relevant to this stream, actually, David, because what you discussed in that podcast is basically what we're talking about now. So give us your points on that. Tell us some of the points you made in that podcast.
Well, I think his takeover of Twitter completely changed how we talk and how we communicate as a society, especially in the West, but possibly in other languages too. I can't say like other parts of the world. I say that's about in English speaking countries. I can't speak for like non-English speaking countries. For English speakers, I'll leave it at that. It changed a lot from my perspective, because he took over a platform that's massively used by like just so many people, and he just completely removed all the stuff that was holding people back from having open conversation. Like before he took over, you couldn't talk about certain topics. So there was only one side of like one-sided opinions being shown, and it was all the side of the establishment, like the woke side of things, right? And quite extremely that way. Moderate stuff wasn't really promoted, and anything negative or critical was deleted. Like you were actually like you were either shadow banned or you were completely banned. You were removed from the platform. They had removed like satire Twitter accounts for making jokes about like there was one satirical tweet where they made a joke about a celebrity. I think it was this Page. I can't remember like the new name. I can only remember the OG name. I don't want to get you in trouble for like dead naming. Do you know
was it one of those satire pages like Tatiana McGrath or whatever? That's
no,
like
it was no. The page itself was the B, Babylon B.
Oh,
and they made a joke about the actor previously known as Ellen Page.
Ellen Page and Elliot Page.
Elliot, that's the one. I totally forgot.
Yes.
So they made a joke about Elliot Page in this tweet, and they used Ellen as like part of the joke, because it was like I said, it's a satirical page. And you know, I think we all know celebrities, when they become celebrities, they open themselves up to be made fun of, right? It's one of those things. So, they got banned, for example, for that. And they were told, unless you remove the tweet, you don't come back on. For example, like, this is the kind of way Twitter was. Elon took over and removed those restrictions. And I think that made a massive change for everybody, because then we start to see, well, there has been a silent majority that has some pretty strong opinions, not all bigoted actually, but reasonable opinions on a lot of topics that are going around. They've not been allowed to share those opinions, because every time they do, they just get, just downvoted to oblivion by internal Twitter systems, so they never get seen by anybody, or they get banned. And when that was lifted, all of a sudden you're seeing the other side, and they have a lot of reasonable opinions and reasonable takes, and people they really care about people. A lot of these accounts, they're not just being horrible, they actually care about society, care about people's mental health, and they have opinions that don't match the current agenda, but they're opinions that are helpful, right? So it changed that I think that made a massive dent in the culture war, because it allowed more exposure to opinions that previously had been deleted.
Well, one of the funniest things about this whole Elon Twitter takeover, David, is as much as so many people are going to hate to acknowledge this, it proved Trump right in 2020. Trump was like, one of Trump's main selling points about trying to win that presidency. He was going, we're going to take on big tech. He was going, because he said, big tech is in collusion with the Democrats. They're running everything. They're controlling everything you see and say. And they were essentially, they were setting up cyberspace in a way that was just funneling one kind of opinion. And people were like, Trump with his conspiracy theories against Twitter and blah, blah, blah. It's an open speech platform. They only ban it if it's bigotry and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Elon's now like a master troll. I've never, ever, ever seen something like this before. He's basically bought a company out just because he has the money to do so, to expose all its secrets. He's done this weekly thing, the Twitter Files, where they now release this documentation of stuff that was happening at Twitter while it wasn't under his ownership. Yeah. And like you said, they had these people on these lists, like these do not amplify lists, because shadow banning is like the most snide little slimiest way to not show. Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to kick either you let someone say what they say and you have it shown as much as everyone else, or that person is actually violating something and you give them a warning, or you just kick them off. You don't just sneakily just mute their tweets from showing so that you can rigged like the election and stuff in your favor, and Twitter
Just so it supports your personal opinions, because everybody who's working at Twitter, or in the past at least, they all had a specific political leaning and specific opinions on all these hot button topics. So that's how they coordinated the platform. Like anyone who downvote anybody who disagrees with us because it's literal violence. That's how they viewed it. They viewed these words, or they're not inciting violence, but they are still violent words, right? Get them downvoted. Don't let them see them. Don't let anybody see them. They had too much power, and it was bloated. He fired like 80% of the workers, and it still works.
Yeah. He even,
mental.
This is one of the observations people don't like that I made, but they banned Trump for allegedly inciting violence. I don't know what your thoughts on this, David, are, but over the whole Capitol riots thing that happened in 2020. But and people are saying, no, Twitter had every right to do this. You can't just use a platform to say stuff like that. But then they had woke celebrities like Chrissy Teigen inciting the BLM riots, literally saying, I will pay X to bail out the rioters, and tweeting that. No consequences. This was just anyone who doesn't think Twitter had just a gigantic bias in what they were doing is just operating. They're intentionally walking around with their eyes closed. But the question I was going to ask actually about Elon, David, is, and this represents this whole pushback against the whole woke stuff that's coming. Yeah. Do you think he's going too far the other way? Like, what do you think now of this thing that he's saying cis is a slur, and Twitter might now be... I don't know what he's been quite coy about it. Do you think he was just trolling, or do you think this is for real? But Elon has now, he's tweeted that cis is considered a slur now on Twitter, as in someone who is cisgender. Yeah. Has he gone too far the other way by doing this? Should people be allowed to say cis, or have you seen him do other stuff that you think is anti-free speech, or that you think is just an example of him now trying to run Twitter in his way to get his opinions? What do you think about that?
I don't know. He's done a couple things based on his own personal opinions, but he's been a bit of a hypocrite, no doubt. But to compare, if you're trying to compare that to the previous Twitter ownership, then you're out of your mind. He's made some mistakes, but it's nothing in comparison to what was happening before. So no, he's not perfect. No, by any means. No, he's been a bit stupid and childish. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I've seen some things where he's like, I don't know, banned some people or removed some accounts for things that clearly just offended him personally, which is, it's what was happening before, but it's a much smaller scale. It's a much smaller scale, so it's still an improvement. The cis thing. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I was going to say, David, regardless of whether he's doing this or not, it still just proves our point that ultimately there's a change in the shift in the culture war. We're not here to say Twitter is now a free speech platform. We're just here to say, holy shit, look how it's changed. Yeah. So whether or not Elon is being totalitarian or not in this regard is besides the point. The point is it's now being run the opposite of how it was run, whether it's now free speech or whether it's going to be used to funnel opinions that battle woke culture.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, it seems to me the woke stuff is getting just as much traction as the. It just depends on the way your timeline's geared. Like I've seen multiple accounts that pop up sometimes where they have more of the kind of woke opinions, and they're still getting a shit ton of hits. But as for the whole cis thing, I don't really know. It depends how if you define a slur as something used to offend someone. Because of if the slur is defined as an offensive word based on somebody's like appearance or ethnicity or whatever. So, for example, like the N word is a slur because it's based on someone's skin color, basically, isn't it? It's on their race. Yeah. If cis is a slur based on someone's like physical attribute as well, an insult based on a physical attribute, then yes, it would be defined. It would be defined as a slur because it's never used in a positive sense. It's used as a way to silence someone and shut them up. Your opinion is worth less because of you being this. Then that's an insult. And it could be, I don't know if it's classed as a slur or not. I don't really know what the definition for that is.
So, to be honest. Here's the thing about the whole cis thing being a slur. I don't take a super strong position on this, right? It doesn't super bother me that the word cis like exists or anything like that, whatever. But I think I have two arguments as why it could subjectively be considered a slur. So one is that what you've just said now. If you ever see it, it's only ever used in a negative. You, David Rams, are a fifth white male, and you're using your fifth white male privilege to take up space in the animal rights movement or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So you never hear, cis people are just a credit to the animal rights movement. They're just, they've just been brilliant. Or, you never see like a list by some page in the animal rights movement, like 20 cis influencers you need to follow right now. Like, it would be like that. It would be over as like 20 cis influencers you need to unfollow, and it'd be like David Rams, George Martin.
Oh man, I am writing that article. I'm writing that article. Cis white male vegans you need to follow right now.
So that would be argument number one. My argument number two as to how it could be subjectively deemed a slur is, you know how one of the arguments against like misgendering trans people is you're erasing their identity, right? So you're saying to someone, you are the thing that you are not subscribing to. Now, with the cis thing, what cis means is you identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. Now, this is a concept that but this is just alien to most cis people. They don't subscribe to this. So you could just equally say this is erasing their identity. A cis person could just say, what do you mean assigned at birth? Are you saying like I'm not a real man? I'm not a real woman? You're just saying I was assigned falsely as a man at birth, and I happen to just be following the orders of the doctor who assigned me this. You could take it as an offense that way. You could see that, like, people have if you were to find that insulting, people would have no right to say to you, you're not allowed to find this insulting. If that's an idea you don't subscribe to and you find it offensive that the doctor assigned you male at birth, David, you have every right to be offended. If you think that's an insult, you do.
It's also, I get you make a good point, and it becomes even more of an interesting point when you consider that for most people, until about 5 minutes ago, gender was directly linked to sex, and man meant an adult male, and boy meant infant male, and girl meant infant female, and woman meant adult female, right? This is how people. This is what we all, defined these words as meaning until recently, when this was suddenly brought into question. So when you consider that as well, it's even more kind of supportive of your point of that maybe people are like, they don't identify with that terminology, right? And they're being forced to, which again, like you said, it's kind of committing the same faux pas as what they're trying to tell you that is violent, right?
Yes,
it's kind of the same thing in a way. Not the same, very similar.
Someone is saying to you, by using the word cis, you are the very thing I'm saying you are, but you do not subscribe to yourself. You were assigned male at birth rather than you're just objectively male or something like that.
Yeah, like the language that you use and that has been, without any debate, without any discussion, without any like real coordinated global discussion, we're just going to change it. And if you don't prescribe to it, tough shit.
Yeah.
This is how it's gone. So a lot of people are, understandably pissed. And you understand why Elon's tweeting that it's become a slur. Well, because people push back. And when you push back, it's just more evidence that you were a bigot when you push back. And then it becomes a slur. And that's why it became an insult, because it's like, typical cis opinion from the system, CIS system,
Yes.
But I don't know about it being a slur or not, but as an insult, 100% it's used as an insult constantly. yeah, with impunity as well. It seems like no one's getting in trouble for using it as an insult.
Yeah. We've got a super chat here from Sherry. Thank you, Sherry, for your donation to my activism. Sherry says, I have noticed a huge decline in animal rights activism from 2020 to present. Yes, unfortunately true. And now vegans are getting discriminated against in restaurants. I believe this is over the Fire restaurant in Australia. Any thoughts, David? I'll let you go with this one.
The decline in animal rights activism has almost definitely been... Okay, I'm going to rephrase that. I think the decline in animal rights activism has almost definitely been from what we're talking about right now. I know just personally, at least one or two handfuls of people who stepped down from leadership positions, stepped away from mainstream organizations because of everything we're saying here, because they were pushed out for having opinions that didn't align, because they were embarrassed and shamed by people for not joining in with, I don't know, BLM stuff, or because they vote for Trump over in the States and they were told don't come back because they have some different opinions on trans stuff, or they have some different opinions on feminism stuff, or race-related stuff. You know, like even just on the BLM stuff, they don't agree with the organization. Okay, you're not welcome, don't come back. Or they're, fighting with people all the time. And so I think I think that might be part. I don't know. I don't know if I want to commit to it, like most likely being that, but from my perspective, it seems like it's that. If I had to put my money on something, I'd put it on that being like the primary cause. But I can't tell you like for sure, you know what I mean? So don't take my word at gospel here. That's what I think is going on.
Yeah. And as for the, one thing I want to say on that, David. Now, that is actually the most common reason I've heard, because I've done loads of little, polls and stuff and questions in vegan groups saying basically, where the fuck is everyone? What's going on? Like, we need to, everyone, can you please get off your ass and get active again for the animals? But I don't think these people have an excuse. Anyone, okay, it's bad that any woke person, any like woke organization has pushed you away from doing groups, but it's literally a carnist excuse. Oh, I've been pushed away by the... Like, it's like when carnists say, vegans push me away from going vegan. You can't... If you're an animal rights activist, you can't say, other animal rights activists have pushed me away from being an animal rights activist. Look, Gary Yourofsky always said, don't even work with others. Activism should just be solo. This was the first...
Hold up, though, George. Because the man you're quoting stepped away from activism for the reasons that we've just gone through. So it's not a good guy to quote, man.
Okay. All right. Let me just give my nuanced take there with Gary. So, maybe Gary doesn't have an excuse. Maybe Gary himself doesn't have an excuse to have done that. But Gary did also factor in, he just said his completely worn out mind and body just simply no longer has the patience to educate non-vegan. You can see this in his comment sections, right? Yeah. One thing where I really noticed his mental health had just declined and he's just snapping at people. And it's like, how the fuck is this guy going to talk to non-vegans anymore? I remember these two duck hunters died in like 2015. They went out on a boat to like shoot some ducks and they ended up like drowning or something. And Gary Yourofsky like did a post on Facebook like celebrating this. He was like, haha, tough, like blah blah blah, circle of life or whatever it was. And quite a few vegans didn't even push back on him. They were just like being kind of gentle in their comments. They were just like, oh, I saw this one comment and it was just like, oh, Gary, I love you and you're my favorite activist ever and everything. But I think we should practice what we preach and we need to speak compassionately if we're trying to build a compassionate movement and blah, blah, blah. And Gary just responded to this woman like, may all the violence and destruction in the world visit you and your family tenfold. And in your time of need, may the words of Matthew Scully, Dominion, ring out in your ears. And he just like fucking lost it, dude. And it was just okay, maybe now it's time for him to just step down. He's like, had his day kind of thing.
That's reasonable. But I will just say one thing as well. That like you're right that it's not a good excuse. I still agree with you. But I would say it's also important to think about how we're asking people to go out and stand against the masses. And it's so much harder to do that when even the people in your own camp also come at you. And you and I have experienced this firsthand. And fortunately for us, we are all got thick-skinned. But I understand that a lot of people aren't. And yeah, it's you need to grow it, right? It's don't just stop. You're gonna have to get more thick-skinned because obviously animals need you to be out there. It's not nice taking it from both sides, but if we stop, only one group suffers, and it's not us.
Yeah, and the point I was ultimately going to make about what Gary said, he said activism should be solo. This isn't my message, by the way. I'm saying to what you can work with others. But Gary always said from the start, he's been saying this since the early noughties. Activism should be something you do on your own. So tough shit. If you're being pushed away from this, or I don't want to do this activism with this group anymore, that's fine. But don't just sit on your ass and do nothing. Just be active on your own. You're like, that's what many of the greatest activists in history. That's what Gary himself did. He left Peter or whatever it was in the early noughties. He just said, no, I'm just going to do solo stuff. And then Sherry, as for the second part of the comment about vegans being discriminated against in restaurants, well, this actually might tie into the overall message that I want to make, and which me and David will get into towards the end of this stream. So stay tuned for that. And we will, David, you get what I'm saying by saying
we'll come to it. Yeah,
we'll come to this. But this basically ties into the overall arching point of what me and David are waffling on about here.
And there's a couple of things just quickly. I want to quickly, just before we move on from that, someone mentioned in the comments there was COVID as well from 2020, and that's 100% right. It probably factored in as well. I think it could have been a combination of the two, because I think the tensions around people canceling other vegans was high, and then COVID got crazy. So I think a lot of people just threw their hands up at that point, like, fuck this, like, this is so horrible right now. Because imagine, right, if you are not feeling a strong community at all, you're actually being pushed away, and then you have to quarantine. Why would you want to go back into that world? And this is where it's important to hear your message, George, of, well, the reason you're going to go back into that world is because animals fucking need you to. And I know that's hard when you're being expelled, you're being pushed away, and then you had all this other stuff that made you, really difficult to live as well. And then one more point, just to clarify, Paul Bashir just popped up in the comments, just clarifying that Gary Yourofsky didn't just quit because of intersectionals and classrooms or whatever. I know. I'm just saying that, like, he's, partially his whole situation is a casualty of these people. That's what I was trying to get at, right? There's a chance if these individuals didn't come after him, isn't there a chance he would have continued maybe for a little bit longer? So yeah, I don't want to make it out like he just bitched out. I know he didn't, but these people pushed him pretty fucking far, didn't they? That's what I'm getting at.
They can't have helped his mental health, ultimately.
No, they don't help anyone's fucking mental health, which is ironic considering that it's like one of the things that they go on about. But I'll let you move on.
But men need to take care of their mental health, David, because of the patriarchy, blah, blah. And
Kill yourself, cis white male.
But yeah, moving on. We'll talk now about this huge case recently that I think represents this massive shift in the culture war, especially when it comes to the corporate stuff. The fact that for the last however many years, these massive corporations have been cozying up to kind of like leftist ideals and stuff. And now things are biting them in the arse for doing so. So this whole thing with the Dylan Mulvaney thing, with the Bud Light case recently. Now, ultimately what happened here was Bud Light thought it would be a good idea to celebrate Dylan Mulvaney, who's a trans woman TikToker who did this series about so and so many days of celebrating womanhood or something like that. And Bud Light decided to send her this special beer can with her face on it, basically, that was to celebrate, being what it means to be trans and stuff like that. And again, a few years ago, David, this is why they did it. this would have raked in the cash. This would have just been a genius marketing scheme. Let's do this. Let's put Dylan Mulvaney's face on a can and get her to promote it on her massive Instagram with like this massive following that she has and blah, blah, blah. And this has just basically massively bit them in the arse. And I just want to say, folks, before we continue with this part of the stream, this is not about hate towards Dylan Mulvaney or anything, who I'm sure is a perfectly nice person, apart from the fact that she's not vegan, right? Like I've not seen anything like hateful coming from them or anything like that. So this isn't about hate or anything like that. This is just about, holy shit, this is a significant thing that has happened recently. Bud Light has basically now been knocked off the top spot of America's best-selling beer. And according to articles, I mean, this is Fox News, so make of it what you will. But let me just share my my screen quickly. So according to Fox News, down 30% compared to 2022. And this is strongly correlated with I mean, look at that can. I mean, what the fuck? I'll play it. Do you know what? As well, I will play. Let me just play. This is all it was. So it was just Dylan Mulvaney being sponsored to do like a little short on her Instagram or something. So let me just show this quickly. So this is all it was for anyone who's aware of how why their sales have plummeted. Bud Light promo. So this is it.
Hi. Impressive carrying skills, right? I got some Bud Lights for us. So I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sports. And I'm not sure exactly which sport, but either way, it's a cause to celebrate. This month, I celebrated my day 365 of womanhood, and Bud Light sent me possibly the best gift ever, a can with my face on it. Check out my Instagram story to see how you can enjoy March Madness with Bud Light and maybe win some money too. Love ya! Cheers! Go team! Whatever team you love, I love too. Okay.
Probably not a good idea to support Wickham Wanderers, Dylan, but yeah, whatever floats your boat. Anyway, so that was it. And then we see Kid Rock, like, you know, he's got like, he's shooting the Bud Light cans in his back. We're seeing this giant pushback. Sales have plummeted. They've like fired all these staff members who like had this idea to do this. And well, what are your thoughts on this? But for me, this is hugely, hugely significant.
It's, I mean, God, I don't even know where to start with it. With this Dylan person, I've never seen anything particularly bad or wrong or evil or, I don't know the word evil. I don't know, it's a weird word to use. But I don't know. I don't really get necessarily why people are so upset. But what I do understand is why this ad campaign was incredibly ineffective. It's designed to go out to people who drink beer. Okay, who normally drinks beer? Well, okay, well, it's March Madness. It's a sports thing, right? So it's going to be tons of guys. And are they going to be the kind of guys that are, I don't know, really open-minded and progressive? And probably not. They're probably mostly going to be pretty close-minded dudes. Not hateful or anything, but just, you know, not particularly interested in trans stuff or Dylan Mulvaney or being made fun of about sports or something. So it was just, they went for the woke buck, right? And put that kind of progressive woke kind of icon doing stuff that was kind of like funny and cutesy to a load of sportsmen. And then they all just went, nah. And it just is a massive backfire, to be honest. I think that's pretty much what happened.
I think Bud has always been targeted at bros, so to speak.
Right.
You remember the Budweiser adverts from the noughties, right? It was just like these bros sitting on the sofa and they'd do the what's up and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Watching the game, having a Bud was like the quote, right? Yeah. And this just massively, fell flat. And it was
completely,
just what they thought, because of how the culture war has been this past few years, where, you know, if you put like a rainbow flag or something, or if you put the BLM fist on something, like the money just piles in. They thought, haha, we'll do the same. And do you know what? I actually think, despite Bud being generally targeted at that audience, David, like the bros and stuff, Actually, a few years ago, I'm confident this would have actually raked them in the cash, because even if the bros didn't like it, those bros would be cancelled, called bigots, and the mob who were the establishment would have bought the Bud Light sales would have gone huge. All the activists in the streets rioting and stuff over whatever issue it was that offended them, over whatever topic, they'd have been marching hand in hand with Bud Lights with Dylan Mulvaney's face on the can. It would have been a huge success for Bud.
Yeah, probably.
But hang on, things have changed, and now there's this massive turnaround. And
I guess there's also the element. I mean, I was from a purely like marketing standpoint, I can see why it didn't work. But there's another element of this, and this is probably more relevant to the culture war stuff. I think a lot of kind of just average people who go out, pay rent, live relatively mundane lives, are kind of getting tired of the all this kind of new terminologies and new, I don't know, ways of seeing the world and these new kind of gender ideologies. And I think they're just kind of getting tired of all of that. And I think a lot of people are, they just kind of don't want to have it have to keep seeing it pop up. I mean, they're dealing with it with their kids in schools. They're dealing with it whenever they go on social media. The news is was covering it a lot. And it was all kind of telling you that, you've got antique views, like you're a dinosaur if you don't change and And then this comes along and they're like, God, now I can't even look at a can of beer without having to think about this shit. I just, it's kind of like when Ben and Jerry's just did a post about Independence Day, for example, and they're talking about stolen land and shit. It's like, fuck off, you make ice cream. Like, what? You know what I mean? Budweiser, like, why are you doing this? Just fuck off. People are just kind of like, let me drink beer and eat ice cream, obviously vegan ice cream, and just leave all the other shit outside, please. And obviously them using a trans icon as an advertisement, whether they like it or not, it is a political statement, right? It's not innocent, right? It's not a completely non-political statement. It's a very political statement.
They're saying, because there's a gender there's a gender ideology war going on, and Bud Light chose to take a side. They said, this is what we say in the gender ideology war that's happening, the gender debate.
Yeah, and it's like some other companies are doing it too. Like they're using, I can't remember which. There's like some fashion company was using biologically male models to model female swimsuits. So like they were modeling like swimsuits when there's clearly like a bulge at the crotch area, and it was supposed to be for like a women's swimsuit, things like that. So it's like, it's political. That's a political move when you do that as a company.
Yes.
You're saying that this is what we believe. And then people are just kind of like, some people are going to be like, oh, okay, so I can't drink beer without this kind of stuff, being pushed here. I can't buy ice cream without some political message. And now I can't even shop for a bikini without a political message. Like, everywhere I look, there's something telling me that I need to change my, and they get sick of it.
What do you think this will mean for Ben and Jerry's? Because they've always been one of the biggest woke pushers. Or do you think it's just that they already have their audience, like they won't get the backlash because their audience just has been that anyway?
I don't know about that. I think a lot of people were saying they were boycotting them, but I don't think it's been anywhere near as much as this Dylan Mulvaney. And again, I mean, my personal opinion on the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing is I really don't get why people are like as crazy as they are about it. Like, I really don't get it. I've not seen, like, is this something I've missed? Has this Dylan done something really, really horrible that I've missed? Because the only stuff I've seen has been it's pretty cringe. Cringe videos.
Well, the argument is that she's erasing womanhood, and she's wearing womanhood as a costume, would be what the Radfems would say, and then obviously like the bros who Bud would just say this is woke crap kind of thing. So there's two sides of the argument here. There's the social justice side that's coming from the Radfems, who are saying like trans women aren't women, and why are you erasing our spaces and our identity? And then there's like the quote unquote bros that Bud is targeted towards, who just say, what is this bullshit? Okay. I think I understand more the kind of what is this bullshit, because it is kind of like random left field for a beer. But the other stuff is just kind of like, we'll just, ignore it, I guess. It's not,
I don't know. Maybe I'm overlooking something here, missing something.
You
with
weren't
Dylan.
triggered, basically.
Not really. I've never really understood the whole thing with this Dylan. I've watched a couple videos and I've just been like cringed out because it's just very like immature and almost childlike. And I'm like, aren't you an adult? And it freaks me out a little bit. Like some adult is acting like a little kid. But and yeah, I suppose you should probably keep your kinks inside the bedroom rather than putting them out over social media. Dressing up like a little girl is clearly a kink, right? I mean, let's be honest. Aside from that, though, it's like, well, everyone's fucking doing that these days. You know what I mean? Like, so many people are posting stuff online. Like, they're saying the stuff that you should say quietly, they're saying it quite loudly, you know? Stuff that should remain private is, like, online these days.
Yeah.
That's a move that society's made, and I actually think we should step back and stop fucking doing that. I think people need to be a bit more private these days, and that goes across the board, you know? So I don't know.
Now, before we come to the final point of the stream, which is tying this all into veganism, because, you know, a lot of people have been watching this and thinking, what are these two angry cis white men ranting on about? What does this have to do with veganism? We are going to come to that, folks, we promise. But just before that, have you ever heard of this idea, this quote, the left can't meme? Have you ever heard this quote, David?
Yeah.
And what do you think it means?
The left can't meme. It tends to be that basically when people like progressives or like, you know, wokies or whatever make memes, they tend to be pretty bad. Basically, they don't understand, like, define meme. You know, it's hard to define. It's like it's just a specific thing, the specific vibe of comedy, and theirs tend to be very literal and not very like memey. They tend to be more like, I don't know, comic book kind of thing.
And the reason for that is the reason for the idea that the left can't meme. It is ultimately based on a truth. It's that basically these past few years, the left has got so woke that all humor that is even slightly controversial or edgy, they don't allow. So all their memes are just very plain Jane, PC, boring. There's nothing insulting, offensive there. And memes like that can't spread. Yeah.
So it's also, you're right, it's kind of like the left can't meme. It's also like the left can't do comedy, because I've watched a couple of I've attempted to watch some like woke stand-up, and it's like, oh man, I don't know, like you're trying to do stand-up without offending anybody. Oh well, they're happy to offend the cis, you know, white men or whatever. That's the only thing they'll go for, but it's just it's boring and it's embarrassing. Yeah,
exactly. Who wants to watch like a 1 hour stand-up show about white male privilege? Like, what funny point are you going to make in that entire show other than just looking like a complete twat? Dude,
the best jokes about white people I've heard come from the completely the people who are just no holds barred. They go after everybody. Like Andrew Schultz is a great comedian. Right. He'll roast Mexicans. He'll roast like black people. He'll roast Chinese people. He'll roast white people. Anyone. If you're sat at his show, you're getting it. And
you're fucked.
He's hilarious. I've never heard a good solid joke about white people from like woke. They're usually just hateful, and you can see the hate. And you're like, it's not funny because I see your face is very hateful and I know you mean it. So I'm not going to laugh because like, I'm actually just thinking, wow, I need to stay away from that person. They're probably want to shoot me or something. I don't know.
But basically, the point I'm trying to make from this is, do you think the right won the meme war? And that's why there's been a cultural shift, because so much of what we think, this sounds lame that I'm saying this, but so much of what we think, David, is just formed by memes that we've seen over the years. Memes have, like, I don't care what anyone says. You might think I'm fucking like a complete pushover for saying this in the comments, but memes have massively shaped my life, shaped my views. Like they complete like, because even if you see one meme that's just like got 3 words on it, it gets you looking into something. Like you see a picture with a catchy caption on it. It's like, boom, you distinctly remember seeing that meme. You distinctly remember what was on it, what the words said, and you got looking into that issue. Yeah. So do you think that the right won the meme war?
I think it's without a doubt. I think when your memes are so good that all you need to do is post a specific cartoon character with no words at all, and people will go crazy and say that you're a white supremacist because you posted a photo of a frog. Right, I think you've won the war at that point.
Yes.
If you can send people reeling and going insane over a badly drawn frog, you win. There's no doubt. David, that's it. That's it.
It's a dog whistle. That's the argument.
Insane. What was the other? I got accused of it once. I used some like meme, and yeah, someone, it's, oh, this is a dog whistle. This is David. So
If you post like, apparently, if you react to someone like, so, hey, I'm coming round for beers at 7, and you react like that, apparently that's a white supremacist.
Is that
like,
one now
gesture.
as well? Brilliant.
Yeah, just like saying, oh, but doing the like, okay, that's now like a white supremacist dog whistle or something like that, and it's got a bit ridiculous. But you know, just think of right. Here's what I want everyone to do in the comment section. Right, I want you all to think in your head of memorable memes you've seen about like sociology, the culture war, whatever, over the past few years. I guarantee you the ones that stick out in your head the most were the right-wing ones because they were offensive, they got further, they were kind of dark, they were edgy. Can you actually think of any leftist memes that actually stick in your head? I can think of one leftist meme that I thought was fucking funny. So, you know, when you think of like the right-wing memes, like, I don't know, one of the first, this is one of the most famous memes there is out there. It's something like, you know, once again, edgy jokes. It will be like, gender is like the Twin Towers. There used to be 2 of them. Now it's a touchy subject. Right. Now that meme is fucking huge. Like everyone remembers seeing that meme. It's like everywhere because that's the type of meme that gets far.
You see, like, but you define that as right wing, but it's not even. It's just critical of progressive ideology. Like, anyone is just anyone who's just not that far down the progressive road would find that funny. You know what I mean? Or I don't know what you would call it, but there's lots of people that would not consider themselves right wing that would agree with that and find it funny.
Yeah.
So it's not even. It's just like right of the crazies that memes basically.
The funniest leftist meme I ever saw. This is I can't think of any others. Is the point? Is there was just one that was like this is like the only one that I thought okay that was pretty fucking funny. Just pointing out little like what you could call hypocrisies. Not to start a debate about the whole gun rights thing, but it was based on gun rights, right? It was just like right. So you know how the thing about right wing people, right wing Americans is they support the Second Amendment, which is gun rights. But they also like really and you know because they want to protect themselves from government tyranny, whatever. But they also really, really love the United States and the flag and everything. And it was just like this, like, big redneck dude with like a fucking whatever it's called, AR-15 or some shit, and like a flag in the background. And the top was just like, respect the flag. And then the bottom just said, of the country I'm stockpiling arms against. that was like the funniest left-wing meme I've ever seen. That one just stuck out in my head. But like... Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
Then what else have they done? Like, how are you going to win?
Yeah, I think you're making a weird definition though of like left and right memes because it's like, you know, even like I imagine even people who are into gender ideology would find that gender one funny. You know, there were only 2 genders and now there's touchy subject. That's funny for like
most of them wouldn't.
But they're the extreme ones, the ones who are just getting offended by everything. I think like not everybody in that world is like that. There are probably tons of like people who would consider themselves to be in that world, but would find that funny. Like there are people, you know, like there are tons of like, you know, it's not fair to tar them all with the same brush. I don't think is what I'm trying to say, because I think a lot of people in that world are sick of the triggered ones ruining it for everybody. You know.
Yeah.
And it's not even like a right-wing meme.
Yeah.
Like that's commenting on it's topical.
Well, I know why you've just made that point, David, because you are on the left yourself and you are getting sick of like these ideologues who have just basically ruined what it means. They've turned the left into a fucking joke. And I mean, even leftist professors now have fought back against this. There was this whole the grievance studies thing. Have you heard of the grievance studies?
No.
Basically, you know what a joke like US college campuses have just become. The whole US education system is now just basically a far left indoctrination camp. It's now like you now go to a US university and you'll just be taught from like day one that like, you know, straight cis white males equals bad. Everyone else equals like oppressed. Cis white males not allowed on this area of the campus. You know, it's just become like a complete shit show. It's really bad what's happened in America. And basically, these leftist professors who are actually kind of like you, just embarrassed about what's happened to what they see as actually the better side of the culture war, the side that actually has the relevant points, unlike the right or whoever, is they decided to just push it and see if they could write the most insane bullshit, David, to be accepted as academic papers at these universities.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know
they
it had a
did-
name. What was the name you used for that?
The grievance studies.
I didn't know it was called that, but yeah, I've watched
Yeah.
the videos about it and I've seen it. Yeah.
So, like, what one of them did, they wrote like an essay about rape culture, and they wrote in this essay that if you let your dog sniff another dog in the park, like you let them off the lead and they run up to another dog and sniff them, that's rape culture. They wrote this in an essay to see if it would get accepted. And lo and behold, David, it did. It got accepted on this course in the US. So they actually ended up teaching this in, like, I don't know, gender studies or whatever it was. It might have even been a part of fucking maths. They're like, they're teaching, they're pushing such bullshit into courses now that it can be literally a part of any course you do. This stuff will be put. This stuff could have literally been taught in maths for all we know. They could have had like this seminar, you know, partway through their maths course. It's like, now we're just going to take like a little seminar about rape culture and stuff, guys. So if you let your dog sniff another dog in the park, that's bad, and you should basically report this to the police if you see this happening or something like that. Now this got accepted, and this stuff, these fake papers, these were written by people on the left who don't like what's happening, basically.
And there was also, you remember that Crowder the Stephen Crowder wrote a paper about fat phobia and submitted it, and it got accepted, and he got invited as his fake character he made up. He got invited to give a talk about it. So they got him all done makeup and fat suit and like made him into a like look like a fat woman, and then he went on a video call and did a talk about his paper that was written just completely bogus. That was a whole thing. You should watch. It's quite
So basically things like Onion articles are basically being taught as facts now in the US. If you can write a satirical piss take paper and it's become such a joke that it will be accepted and taught as fact in academia in the most powerful country in the world. So did you have any final points to make on this before we come to the final point of the stream, David, which is about why this is all relevant to veganism?
Yeah, I suppose it's I think what we're seeing is we kind of reached, I mean, every day I think we've reached peak mental madness, but then every day that, you know, there is still more coming. I mean, I still see stuff that I'm just shocked about. So I think the tide is turning, but I think we've maybe getting close to the peak of how far can this go before people start to wake up. And I mean, just recently, some countries that it's not really working so well. And like, there's been something happened in Finland, which I know nobody will know about, because unless you're Finnish, you're going to see no reports on this, because it's. But there's this Finnish politician. He got invited to a rock festival, big metal festival. He went to the festival, and he hadn't seen his emails, right? But the festival had emailed him and de-invited him, right? While he was like whatever at home or whatever, he hadn't seen his email. So he went to the festival, and they found him. The security found him. Think about this: just a guy in a festival. They singled him out, found him, and asked, "Are you this person?" He said, "Yes, that's me." They said, "You have to leave," and they removed him from a festival. All because he'd made a statement saying that he didn't believe children should be taught gender ideology. So he'd said this as part of one of his political beliefs. The festival didn't know this. They privately invited him, and this wasn't public. And then someone in the team said, "Hey, no, he said this." So they retracted the invitation. He didn't see it, went to the festival, like thousands of people, and they found him and removed him. Just get your head around that for a second. So we are at a point where, like, yeah, there's a tipping point for sure, but this kind of shit is still going in some places. Finland is like a really super hardcore country for this kind of stuff still, it seems.
Right.
But yeah, so you know, there's a shift, but there's also some weird shit going on.
Absolutely. We've just got a comment here saying, do you know the concept of the Overton window? So I'm not super versed on what this is, but as far as I know, it's like the shift. There's like a little window that sort of like metaphorically slides along and shows what the societally acceptable viewpoint is to hold at a time. So I guess what's been happening these past few years is they've been pushing further one way But now I think they're potentially pushing further to another way. And right, I'll tell you what, we'll just come on to the basic last point of the stream here, which is tying this all into veganism. So I think there's going to be the tide is turning, and there's going to be a huge backlash against woke. People are being pushed further to the right. People are being pushed further away from the quote unquote societally acceptable ideas, the comfortable opinions to have. Maybe now these more what were the controversial opinions to have, maybe soon these will be sort of the mainstream, the norm, the acceptable opinions to have. And maybe in a few years' time, maybe you'll be the bigot for saying something like, I support this social justice group, or I have this opinion on gender ideology that was the thing that, I'd be canceling people for if they disagreed with me on. And how does this all tie into veganism? Because I think now more than ever, because of what's on the horizon, because of what's happening, because there's going to be a huge fight back against this, now more than ever, we need to ensure as animal rights activists that veganism is not associated with woke culture. Because every time we see one of these anti-woke, like one of these like idiot like commentators in the mainstream, like that Michael Knowles, who I did a video on recently, the first thing that comes into their head when they hear vegan is woke. Now, these guys' ideas are only just getting more and more popular. Okay, people are loving, Piers Morgan and stuff. People are loving his childish, idiotic interviews of vegan. Haha, you showed that woke idiot who's boss, eating that burger in front of them, blah, blah, blah. Now, here's the thing. For me, it's just a complete cancer within the animal rights movement when people are saying veganism is a progressive leftist movement. It's a far left movement. It's a this movement. It is a quote unquote woke movement. Do they not realize how damaging this is if we want to grow the animal rights movement to be as far as possible? And you could have almost slightly agreed with them a few years ago, David, if their point was about growing, because woke was the establishment. Woke was like the in thing. And maybe if you wanted more people, you would have to be more in bed with these woke ideas. But what's on the horizon now, as much as I'm glad that there's a pushback against woke, David, honestly, I think it's actually a little bit scary, some of the things that we might see on the horizon. What are your thoughts like on all this? Do you think that I'm onto something here?
Yeah. I mean, I can talk about what happened with me and my experiences with this, what you're saying. I mean, from 2019, when I was first exposed to this these kind of ideologies and how harmful they can be. I mean, back in 2020 then, actually, when I was having conflicts with an animal rights organization over everything we've been discussing here, like minor conflicts, minor disagreements, but it was growing and growing and growing. And then it all came to a head when the whole George Floyd thing happened, and I saw that them, as well as many others, were trying to guilt trip people and force them to speak about a topic that they had no interest in. They hadn't done anything wrong. They hadn't shot anybody or killed anybody or hurt anybody, yet they were being forced to speak as if they were responsible for it. And a lot of people didn't want to. They're animal rights activists. They're not interested in this other stuff, and they don't need to be interested in it. They have not done anything wrong, right? That's the important thing. If you're not doing anything wrong, you're not necessarily obliged to go out and do activism for something. You know what I mean? And I made that point. I made that point that if you are not abusing humans, great. And if you want to continue focusing on animal rights while not abusing humans, that's the minimum that anybody could ask of you. You're not obliged to do human rights activism at the same time. And that's the opposite of that was what people were saying. No, you should. You have to. If you don't do this, you're not intersectional. If you're not intersectional, you're not really animal rights, actually. You're just a bigot faker. So I made some comments against that. I made a video against that, and I lost the job with an animal rights organization and became quite a controversial person because of that. Like, a lot of people turned on me. A lot of people were saying horrible things about me. Now, that was, for me in that moment, I realized very clearly that, okay, this is not good. Like you've just said, this is cancerous. This has caused me, an extremely passionate activist with tons, like loads of skills in video creation, currently working in a country that needed more exposure, and India needed more, international exposure. I was in a great position to continue doing the work. They chose to sever their ties with me based on that. Yeah. Now that throws in the face of animals, right? That was against animals, that move. They were willing to do that because of these ideologies. They were willing to screw over animals because of that, right? So I realized very early on that, we need to reject these ideologies. And as a movement, we need to not to be trying to combine all these things. And we need to realize where the focus is. Now, and the difference between back then and now, which is what I was getting to. Back then, the majority was silent because they were terrified of having happened to them what was happening to me. Because no one wants to be public, getting absolutely, campaigned against in public, right? No one wants to be called names. I was being called all sorts of shit for a long time. It was horrible. I lost my income. I lost a lot of respect from people. I had to rebuild and keep going and just fight through it, right? And then come out the other side and hope that it was going to be okay. It was horrible. It was a horrible time. But now this tide is turning and the majority is now more vocal. And like, I agree with you, now more than ever, when the majority of people are starting to not be scared anymore, they realize that they're not going to get cancelled now. They've got people like Elon at Twitter on their side. Twitter's on their side. Seriously, like he's with that kind of backing of such a big figure, and more celebrities are now being like, you know what, we're also sick of this shit. More and more people are stepping up and being like, no, you will not cancel us anymore. We will say the things we believe. We'll criticize some of the things you believe, and we can have debate. You cannot tell me I'm a bigot for wanting to debate this with you and discuss this with you, right? People are stepping up. So yes, I agree with you. Now more than ever, we cannot be seen to be part of these incredibly unreasonable people who, want to cancel and instead of debate and refuse to discuss the things they believe because they know they'll get destroyed. We can't be a part of that. We can't be associated with that. And, whatever, when I say that, that looks like a lot of different things, right? You put it down as intersectionality, whatever that means, right? It comes in all different forms, doesn't it? And this kind of like woke behavior or whatever. But yeah, now more than ever, we need to be very clear about what we're here for. And it's about animals. We're here for animal rights. We're here to talk about animals. We're here to defend animals. We're here to try to encourage people to stop doing all this stuff to animals. If they ask about anything else, it's, sure, we can talk about that somewhere else, but it's irrelevant to this. This is what we're here for. Our political opinions aside from this are not relevant for right now. We're talking to you about animals. And if you have a different one to me on other stuff, it doesn't matter. We're here for animals. That needs to be, now more than ever, I agree with you, it needs to be, I've been saying this since, like I said, I've been saying this the last 3 years, but with the tide turning, it's going to be a problem if we don't sort this out quickly. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. And I think, we're seeing a lot of disappointing things from people who you would assume to be all about facts and logic and stuff when it comes to animal rights. And I think maybe some of the woke culture and stuff within animal rights might have even played into that, because the woker vegans have acted over the years, the more it's made people who you would otherwise assume to be rational, who push back against woke culture and that, the more it's made them have this skewed perception that vegan is some kind of woke thing. But we did see some promising things have happened recently. I think what was one significant thing was Misha Petrov, I think, having me on her channel. Misha Petrov's one of the most popular up and coming anti-woke channels. She makes brilliant commentary on all the stuff happening in the US and all the the college campus stuff and that. And the fact that she actually listened to the video I made, the video that vegan teacher made about veganism, and actually had me on her channel to discuss those issues. Yeah, and she seemed completely open-minded to it. That was significant. And I think a lot of her, you're seeing loads of her followers in the comments saying unsubscribed and all this kind of stuff. But what's funnier is that even surprised a lot of vegans on the left. They were like, what? Misha Petrov seems open to the idea of veganism. She had George on the channel. This is crazy to me. But we need to be doing more to, I'll tell you what doesn't help, David. I don't know if I want to name names, but, I saw, recently I saw like, this whole idea of like, if you associate with someone with this view, that makes you a this and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There's so many idiot vegans who have this view. And what's happening as a result is they're not actually going on like non-vegans podcasts and stuff like that to advocate animal rights. And the biggest case of that happened to me recently was there was a certain fairly well-known activist in the animal rights movement who refused to go on David Nino Rodriguez's channel. David Nino Rodriguez is like a patriot kind of truther guy. He has like 120,000 subs or something like that. And this well-known vegan activist who produced a very well-known vegan documentary said, no, I will not appear on your anti-science, racist talk show or something like that. And as soon as I heard about that, I was like, well, fuck it. Well, I'll go on then. And the funniest thing was, David, it was the most effective piece of activism I'd ever done. I've never turned so many people vegan. And that was towards a right-wing audience.
Yeah.
So, well, what are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
It's obviously it's ridiculous. And anyone who actually cares about, really cares about making change and this is the thing, it's about putting animals before any other, okay, put it this way. What's the risk of going on this guy's channel? Okay, what's the risk to human life? This guy has some opinions. Let's imagine he has some racist opinions, right? You going on there and defending animals is going to do what exactly to the people he's racist against? Is anyone going to get hurt or die from you going on? No, it's not going to happen, right? And so your impact is going to be positive, not negative. So even if this person had some particularly horrible views, your reason for not going on makes no sense at all. If you could argue, okay, if the argument is more that it would be a waste of time because they won't let me speak, they're toxic, the environment's toxic, the people are toxic, it's just a horrible environment, and I'd rather save my energy for something else, I'll listen to that. I'll listen to that all day. That's a great reason to not bother with certain people. But if this person's like, no, I'm super reasonable, I promise you I'll give you space, it's going to be a normal chat, I'm going to listen to you, and you just don't like some of their opinions, that's a ridiculous reason to not go on their channel. Yeah. If all the indicators point to it being a very useful conversation that is going to be reasonable, then I don't get why you wouldn't take that. You're clearly not putting...
It's
like I said, if it's something else about availabilities, mental health, blah, 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 right, fine, obviously. But if it's just because they have some beliefs you don't like, come on, man. Come on.
And Sherry, going off this super chat you sent in earlier, this is the point I want to make. So you're talking about vegans getting discriminated against in restaurants. So, we had this guy recently ban all vegans from his restaurants. Part of this, I think, is to do with pushback against woke culture. He felt that he probably ties in veganism with the mob who are browbeating people over, over this and that, when actually all we're actually doing is trying to awaken people to the truth about the actual oppression that they're causing. Woke people aren't interested in showing you about the actual oppression. What they're interested in showing you about is fake oppression that they've created in their heads. They're trying to find stuff to hate on you for. So they're just interested in canceling you, putting you down because of how you look, what your demographic is. If you're a white male or whatever like that, it's just pure hatred. You could have done nothing wrong. In fact, you can even try and suck up to these people and they'll still just screw you over.
But once they smell blood, they don't stop.
Exactly.
If you give in, it doesn't end there.
But there's a gigantic difference between woke and awake. Veganism is not woke. Veganism is just awake. Veganism is the red-pilled actual philosophy of life. And then you're seeing these wannabe red pillars like Andrew Tate, who's actually the most blue-pilled person you could actually imagine. He said he refuses to even discuss anything with vegans at all, which means he just wants to remain an ignorant sleepwalker. But, part of this whole thing about, vegans now being discriminated against in restaurants, I think that, what do you think, David, that this could be partly due to veganism actually being associated with wokeness?
Well, the banning of the vegans and all that kind of stuff, Yeah, I don't know. It's the whole thing is very strange to me. It could be though, yeah. It could be it could be that the Piers Morgans of the world and the the Joe Rogans, the people who are like very vocally, famously anti-vegan, have influenced someone like him into thinking that, oh, this is just a community of fucking idiots and I don't want them anywhere near my restaurant. Yeah, that's totally, and honestly, and this is going to be pretty brutal to say, but maybe he's got the wrong impression by some of the activism too, because if you, for example, if you look at something like Vegan Booty's activism without understanding the context, without understanding why it's being done, that can, that might create a pretty negative, reactive impression from someone like that guy who is in Australia, right? So it could be a combination of things. It could be that, the stuff we mentioned about all the cancel campaigning, all that, combined with seeing maybe a couple of Tasha's protests, and he thinks, oh, I'm just going to ban these people because they're all trouble. It could be a combination of things, yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of one of the risks with the type of activism Tash does, which we discussed yesterday. Is like, there's a risk that people take it the wrong way, but there's far more good that comes of it, I think. From getting the message out and getting people to pay attention. But yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated topic, that whole. We're trying to mind read with this guy, and it's difficult, isn't it? But yeah, you might be onto something.
How do we de-wokeify veganism, David? If you think that veganism being associated with woke culture could potentially cause our movement harm with the upcoming change in the culture war, with the potential backlash on the horizon, how do we go about doing that?
We just literally have to. This is controversial to say what I'm going to say, but we've got to try our best to be. It's just extremely relatable to the majority, and that means, we've got to kind of, and that doesn't mean that like we all have to be the same, but I suppose we could do well by trying to avoid committing ourselves to fringe movements and fringe parts of society and associating with them, because the fringe parts tend to be there's the appearance that these things are really loved and universally loved, some of the fringe parts of society, right? The woker parts or whatever. But I think that's just an appearance. I think the reality is that there's a very big majority that is like, like what, like this shit's weird, or like I'm so sick of seeing this. And I think we got to be careful not to align ourselves with the extreme fringe, sides of things, which is tough. I don't want to get into detail because I know what happens if I name examples. Is going to open up a whole fucking bucket of shit. But there are a lot of examples of fringe, quote unquote, woke stuff that seems like everyone's doing it, but it's probably not. It's probably like actually still a very small minority that is in that world.
So do you think it was a case of the squeakiest wheel got the grease? Do you think it was just a very, very loud vocal minority?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And then a lot of people just being quiet to toe the line so they don't get cancelled. And then now we remove the cancel fear, and now we're seeing the massive pushback.
They operate like ISIS. There's the saying that ISIS wants you to think that they're bigger than they actually are, right? So whenever there's any kind of like attack in the world, ISIS will previously, they will just claim responsibility for it. There was even that massacre at the hotel in Las Vegas in like 2016, 17, whenever it was. I can't remember. That guy, Stephen Paddock, I think his name was. Just open fire from that from the MGM Grand or something, or something like that, and he murdered like 55 people or something like that. And ISIS claimed responsibility for that, even though it was nothing to do with them. I think woke people then have kind of operated in the same way over the past few years. They've very, very, very convincingly managed to portray the idea that theirs are the norm, that theirs are just this is the mantra. This is like, oh, you don't believe that, David, you don't believe that Black Lives Matter is not, a true social justice group, or, so you don't believe that trans women are women, or you don't believe that pride should be celebrated. Well, you're the outlier here. You're the minority. You're the bigot who needs to be outcast. When it could actually be the case that most people had the opinions that were like the uncomfortable ones to actually hold, just because this tiny minority basically of terrorists have managed to convince people that they have like all the power and stuff. Do you think that could be the case here?
Yeah. And it didn't convince people they did have all the power. They had the backing of like Twitter. They had the backing, they still have the backing of like Facebook and Instagram to a certain extent, and YouTube as well. You know, you'll get shut down for having certain opinions on some of these platforms still today. So, you know, the power is still there, but it's not like it's the majority that's making that happen. It's a minority. These are minority opinions that are being amplified by powerful people who can, change, like make your life difficult, like lose your job like I did, or lose your social media, or have all your friends hate you because they think they have to because of this. If they don't, then they'll get cancelled too.
Yeah.
So I think that now that's no longer the case. A lot of people are now shifting, and the people in this chat, I highly doubt anyone in this chat is guilty of the things that we're talking about. And this is kind of the worrying thing here. Like if I could sit in front of, imagine if I could get 100 people in front of me who have all tried to link veganism with some kind of other ideology that is fringe and controversial, right? If I had them all in front of me, let's imagine they're linking it with like, they're saying like, oh, you're not vegan unless you support like trans women being women, or you're not vegan unless you support transitioning children, or you're not vegan unless you support BLM. If I could sit them all in a room, I would say to them, listen, you have your opinions, that's fine. I'm not going to debate you on those opinions. But when you link your animal rights opinions in with very, very, very highly controversial and debated topics, and you tell people one doesn't come without the other, the only thing you're doing is harming animal rights, because then the majority of people think that you have to hold that one to not abuse animals. They think, oh, so to not abuse animals, I need to also believe this, 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 and this. And I don't agree with you. You're not relatable. I'm not going to listen to you. You're on the fringes of society and you're some kind of weirdo. And I don't want to listen to you. Yeah. And that's, we can't afford to have that anymore. So it's like, you believe what you want to believe, but just don't try and associate it with animals. And trying to, that's the simple, that's it. That's how we de-wokeify. That's how we change things. You can be as woke as you bloody want, but just keep it, just go and do all your other stuff. Do whatever you want. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like you do you. You have your own opinions. You have your own, just don't try and connect it all.
Just bringing up Rosita's super chat again. Thank you for your donation, Rosita. Rosita says, I'm conservative and religious, but also vegan. Now, here's one powerful thing I think we could do. I think we need to exemplify that religion is compatible with veganism. So the Christians, like I've got an upcoming live stream very soon. I'm going to be hosting a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew who are going to speak out against what's happening to animals. And I think we need to basically amplify that idea as well, because a lot of the like anti-woke pushback as well comes from sort of like the hard right Christians and stuff in the US. So I think that as well could be significant if we can get more, Christian vegans and Muslim vegans and stuff to actually be really outspoken about why veganism is not only compatible but preferable in their own religion. Why, any loving God wouldn't teach this. I think that could also help curry favor slightly with the right or the anti-woke. Not that every right-wing person is religious, and not that every left-wing person is an atheist at all. I mean, plenty of leftists are religious, and plenty of people on the right are atheists. But I think that could also help as well. I think there has to be a culture of more people actually making an effort to speak out, especially if you're one of the people in the movement who isn't woke. Yeah, like you said, now is kind of the time that you've kind of got to amplify your voice and actually make sure that you're the one being heard, and showing that it's just a moral obligation to be vegan. We're not asking anyone to do something that's like some crazy like woke social justice cause. This is simply about just leaving others alone, not participating in slavery and massacres. That's not woke. And what kind of insult is it to say if you're anti-woke and you're not vegan, and you correlate veganism with wokeness, you're just insulting yourself. What does that say about you? Do you think not stabbing and gassing others to death, not raping others with metal rods? If you think that that's woke, what kind of a person are you, basically? These are just moral obligations.
Yeah. I think the stream that we did recently, where we went through all of the left and right opinions and how they were all actually compatible with veganism, I think, you know, that's the way that we should absolutely go forward. It's to show people that this idea of not being an abuser to animals, this idea of trying to live in a specific way to create a better world for animals, it's not associated with any political ideology, and it can be compatible with practically any belief system you hold. You know, any belief system any reasonable person holds. That's pretty much it. That's the only thing you need to be, actually. The only necessity for you to be vegan is that you're reasonable. That's it. If you're an unreasonable person, well, then you're probably not compatible with veganism then, because we're not going to be able to reason with you. If you
that's like Jim Bob in the comments. Yeah, so we've got Jim Bob who just cannot Jim Bob's in the comments here. He's just incapable of having any rational thought about morality because he has no empathy. It's like a cognitive impairment that he was born with, where I don't know if it's like the amygdala or some part of his brain. I mean, this guy thinks that dogs shouldn't be protected from being skinned alive or thrown and burnt in a fire. So how can you reason with? He's just a no-hoper.
No, this is like an extreme position that some people take, and I've seen it before as well. They view, and I know of my friend's granddad, I think it is. He's also been like raised with this same. Some people are raised like this. They're raised to believe that all animals are they're like a table or a chair, but they're living, and any pain they experience it's negligible. It doesn't matter. You know, like she told me some stories. I don't want to make everyone sad, but she told me some stories about her granddad that when they had the local dogs that they had, like. Not local dogs, his hunting dogs had puppies, because he couldn't afford to like feed all of them. He would just get them at birth, see which ones seemed strong, and the other ones he'd just kill them, like smash them. For him, they were nothing. They're like things. So yeah, some people have that, and they've convinced themselves of that. I mean, all the science and everything tells us that, you know, they are experiencing the world in a similar way to us, or at least in some similar way to infants. They experience pain in similar ways to us, and again, similar ways to infant humans. But some people won't, you know, they won't get past this idea that all they are is property and items and things. And if you're talking to somebody like that, then, well, that's unreasonable, and you're not going to get through to that person. They're an unreasonable person if they are like, for example, my friend's granddad, or if I don't know anything about Jim Bob, but if that's the way he is, then yeah, that's very unreasonable, and you're probably wasting your time.
Yeah, if you want to see a clip of Jim Bob and his, you can just watch my recent video on Michael Knowles. There's a clip of what he said there in his debate with Vegan Gains. What he said about, I'm not even exaggerating what he said about the dog being skinned alive or thrown in the fire. So there is just some people who simply can't be reasoned with. You can't reason with the unreasonable. But to the reasonable people out there, to the true people who genuinely are anti-woke and have rationality and good thought. You know, Buck Angel is an example of this, who you had on your podcast, David. Now, he's very rational at cutting through like a lot of stuff and pushing back against certain woke stuff. But then he made a very disappointing comment recently on Instagram about, you know, he just said like, I love meat or something like that. And then he compared it to like plants feeling pain or something like that. And we both got in the comments there. Did he ever respond to you about that, David?
No, it's sad because in private, we'd had a discussion. Obviously, I had a chat with him, and he agreed with me that animals are as innocent and as vulnerable as children. He agreed with me on that point. I mean, because it's an obvious point that you would agree with, right? They are, obviously, it's not the same, and we can agree all together, fine, that human children, for whatever reasons, all your different rational, you know, people have different opinions, that they're more important, right? That's fine. If you want, I'll buy. I don't need to fight with you on that. If you think human children are more important than animals, I don't care, right? It doesn't mean that you get to go and abuse animals, though, does it? Right?
They
Like,
just have to be
I
more
think,
important than your taste buds, right?
exactly. It's like I think Annie is more important than some guy in the street. I'm not going to go murder the guy in the street. That's
Right.
fine to think one's more important than the other. And he
Yeah.
agreed. He's like, yeah, I agree. So then, and I asked him, so why? What can I do to help you change then? Because obviously you agree, and you're a caring person. You care about children, and you also, because they're vulnerable, and you care about animals because they're vulnerable. What can I do to help you change? And that was the first time he didn't respond to me. And then on Instagram, I kind of repeated that. I said, in private, we had this discussion, and you said this, like, where are we right now, kind of thing. What can we do? Didn't respond again. All I can hope with him is that he's paying attention at least. I mean, he stopped responding, and that's a good thing, though. I think it's actually good that he stopped on Instagram, because if he continued after my comment being irrational, then I'd be like, oh, maybe he's a lost cause. But the fact that he stopped, that tells me that, okay, maybe he's going to stop and think now. And, you know how it is, dude. Like, some of the biggest trolls end up going vegan, right? And I've met tons of people who said, oh, I used to troll the hell out of Joey Carbstrong, and now I'm a vegan. So it happens, right? So, I'm
Do you think you could get Buck Angel on again for a chat?
not right now. He wouldn't do it because of this, I think. And I think, honestly, like, I'm not going to hyper focus on him because he's not done anything particularly that bad. He made a few stupid comments, but aside from that, with me in private, he was very, very understanding, and he was very kind about animal rights and veganism. So for me, I don't think it's worth any kind of campaign at this point, or anything going after him or making a video about. I don't think any of that would help at this point. And I don't see the benefits of it. He's not done anything that wrong.
Maybe you should just tag him in your share of this and just say to him to watch the last 5 minutes or something, because we bring him up.
I think with him, I think it's like a long game, playing the long game. I'm just like, we'll see, because like, I don't know, I don't talk to him that much, but he's, like I say, he's a reasonable person, and I don't want to make the mistake of like, for example, with Ryback. That's a whole
that was
separate
disappointing.
Thing, right?
That was so disappointing.
With Ryback, with Buck, he's not made the full connection. So I don't want to do anything like, I don't know, mean or I suppose not mean, but I don't call out. I don't want to do any of that. With Ryback, okay, he'd come on my podcast and literally, I didn't goad him. I didn't encourage him. He just told the world, I'm vegan because I care about animals, and these fuckers lie to us, and it's the scumbags, these scumbags. I didn't drag this out of him. He said all that stuff, and I was sat there shocked, like, wow, this guy really cares. So when he just U-turned, I mean, that and I wasn't even that mean in that video. Yeah. But yeah, with Buck's not done anything close to that, so that's why I've not really done anything. Right, I mean, you got to pick your battles, right?
Yeah,
choose your battles.
Yeah, that was really disappointing with Ryback, because it seemed he'd so much made the connection, and then it's not like he didn't even release some kind of statement as to say, like, some kind of philosophical statement. It was like, oh well, actually, it takes this much grain to feed this animal, and then blah blah blah. And I decided to change. I look at this from this perspective, blah blah blah. No, you just see him the next day just going, eating a pizza or eating a burger. It's like literally like TikTok troll level, a video of him just eating, just saying,
Yeah, and he just blocked me immediately as well. Like, he just saw the video. I didn't see the video. He saw I'd made a video and just insta block. Twitter, Instagram, everything just gone.
Wow.
So I don't even know. I don't know what the hell happened there.
Maybe more of us need to get working on calling out Ryback for this, because it is a disappointing U-turn, and he'd have been such a good representative of it. I mean, the dude's fucking huge, and he was eating a plant-based diet.
I saw one comment he'd made. He said, all the vegans who never supported me while I was vegan are now coming to give me shit. No, I'm not vegan, which suggests that it was some kind of, maybe he was, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It suggests that it's an ego thing. That is the reason that he's done it, and that he didn't. That he's
who is vegan though in WWE is Lita, David. If you can you work your magic and get her on a fucking live stream, that would just be fucking amazing.
Yeah, I think I heard. I don't really know these, like, the wrestling world, but But yeah, I suppose we could. I don't know. I think I mean, I also tagged, and I made in my video, I spoke about Austin Aries, who was also still vegan, and
Yeah.
when I tagged him on Twitter, he untagged himself from the post. So I was wondering if he's like, I don't know, if he's like maybe upset that I made this video, or so that I don't know like what the wrestling community's like, and if I could have any more of them on, maybe they would be, you know, I'm wondering like, okay, that video I made was very reasonable, but I'm wondering if I've kind of like burned some bridges by accident with that. But I wasn't even being that mean, so I don't know. It would be pretty immature to like not come on or not talk because of that, you know. Anyway, but who knows, man? We never know.
Yeah. But David, end of the stream now. We'll make a summarizing statement. So my quick, short summarizing statement to all this would simply be, guys, look over every single thing me and David have discussed in this stream. All these crazy bits of news stories that were just unthinkable a few years ago. These things were unthinkable, right? And now there's going to be a huge, something big is on the horizon. There's going to be a huge pushback in the culture war. And now more than ever, we have to ensure that veganism is not seen as like, you know, a progressive, woke, left kind of political movement. It's for everyone. It's battling the status quo. It's pushing back against the horrors that are happening to animals right now on the farms and in the slaughterhouses. And it has nothing to do with whichever side of the political spectrum that you are. All that's required to be vegan is that you're not a scumbag. You don't need to and call out if you see other vegans in the vegan movement saying that it's a politically left-leaning movement or something like that. Debate them on this, because this is not going to be helpful, especially with how the tide's going to turn in the coming years. We don't want veganism to be screwed over again, you know, screwed over and just seen as this like tiny fringe hippie cause. We need veganism to go mainstream. So David, I'll let you have a final word now as well.
Yeah, no, the people who need to see this won't see it, but just on the off chance they do, I would say the next time you're wondering whether you should do something that's good for animals, but that goes against, I don't know, the person that you would try to help go vegan doesn't believe what you believe, or you don't want to go to an event because you heard someone that doesn't believe what you believe. I wish you'd spend a couple of minutes in a slaughterhouse. I wish you'd spend a couple of minutes in a factory farm and smell and hear and see exactly what's going on close up as well. You know, I wish everybody who's thinking that way could have this opportunity, because after that, you would realize that no disagreement on politics should ever come in between you trying to stop that. So please rethink your values and your principles and get them in line, because they're bang out of whack. Put animals first.
Thank you, David. Some great final words to end with. And we'd like to thank every single person who joined us for the stream. So thank you all. And please remember to, if you found the stream insightful and a fun watch, please remember to share on your platforms, and we will speak to you soon.
Cheers.